I would begin by thanking France and Ecuador for convening this meeting. As is clear from the statements of Western colleagues, which are, by the way, very minimalist, the topic of the alleged Russian strike on the Children's Hospital, for the discussion of which they convened us today, clearly is not a very gratifying topic. And they probably saw many analyses of what happened on photos and videos, from which it clearly follows that this was a missile of the Ukrainian air defense. Here you get the magic of verbal gymnastics demonstrated today by Western members of the Security Council, trying by any means to protect the Kyiv regime. For us, this meeting is an excellent opportunity to tell the truth about what actually happened. However, the truth, as is well known, does not interest our Western colleagues, and in the best traditions of the Bucha provocation, or with the Mariupol hospital, which was mentioned today, they tried to engage in wishful thinking by condemning the allegedly intentional strike of the Russian Air Force against the children's medical facilities. Now, the dishonesty of this tactic is clear to the naked eye, as was noticed immediately by the Ukrainians themselves, thanks to the video of the strike against the hospital complex, which appeared in the internet, and negated all attempts by Kyiv and Western propagandists. Here are the references of the most full publication. These are QR codes. And here's what immediately after the event was published by Ukrainian Telegram channels, which remain the only uncensored source of information, uncensored by the Ukrainian authorities for their compatriots. And I quote, "The presidential office has instructed everyone to only publish and promote information related to the children's clinic Okhmatdyt in order to A, divert attention from other issues, as there are interesting sites nearby where people could question the government about why military facilities are located so close to residential areas and hospitals. B, attempt to boost the morale of the army and the people by fueling hatred toward the enemy. They claim that the enemy intentionally targeted children, although everyone knows that the rocket was accidentally shot down." This is a quote. C, distract the masses from the daily lawlessness of the government, corruption, tariff increases, price hikes, growing disillusionment, etc. D, divert attention from the constant retreat of the armed forces of Ukraine. E, create additional reason for justifying the conscription in the name of Zelensky. And E, create a media hype in the Western press before the NATO summit. End of quote. Here's another quote. Regarding the strike against the Okhmatdyt children, it's quite clear it was a air defense of NASAMS that went off course and hit the children's corpus. Western air defense also often miss their targets, and most often this happened when the air defense of the Ukraine hit Poland, hit a tractor. If the X-101 missile had hit the building, the damage would have been much worse. We all constantly write that Ukrainian air defense missiles often go off target. There was many such tragedies before, and the presidential office was constantly lying to people that these were Russians who intentionally struck residential buildings. The presidential office has to constantly fuel hatred among Ukrainians and justify the continuation of the war by these artificial tragedies. And the military themselves acknowledge such tragedies are as a result of air defense. This is a quote from Ukrainian sources, it's not mine. Colleagues, I hope now you can understand that no matter how the Kyiv regime and its Western sponsors tried to represent the tragedy as a result of an intentional Russian strike, even in the eyes of regular Ukrainians, the version does not hold water. In these conditions, we really regret that the Council has been drawn into this dirty propaganda campaign of Kyiv and its abettors. And I'd like to ask Mr. Zhovner a question. How he, when he went into the street, understood that the hospital was subject to a Russian strike? Who provided this kind of information, which clearly contradict common sense? Does he understand that if this had been a Russian strike, there would have been nothing left of the building, and all the children and most of the adults would have been killed and not wounded? But due to the fact that the screen has been darkened, I don't think we'll hear an answer from Mr. Zhovner. We have often stated that Russia does not strike civilian targets in Ukraine. And if speaking of strikes of the Russian Air Force, which were conducted against military targets in Ukraine and the air bases of Ukraine, one of these targets is the factory of Artem, one of the largest enterprises of the Ukrainian defense industry. This is one of the main producers of aviation missiles, weapons, and ammunition. And this target, according to data based on objective evaluation and based on testimony of Kyiv, of people of Kyiv themselves, was hit. Since the factory is about 2 kilometers from the Okhmatdyt Children's Hospital, there's every opportunity to assume that the air defense missile was meant to intercept the Russian missile and which was meant to hit the factory. Now, such tragedies could be avoided if the Kyiv regime, in contravention of international humanitarian law, did not locate air defense and heavy weaponry in residential neighborhoods. However, its Western sponsors prefer to look away regarding that important fact. We also can't fail to mention the fact that the Ukrainians themselves in the social media noted an interesting trend. The tragedy with the hit of the air defense rocket into the hospital, children's hospital, occurred on the eve of the NATO summit. And this is the third NATO summit since the beginning of the special military operation. And similar situations occurred on the eve of each one of them. It was the same on the 27th of June of 2022 when Ukrainian media reported about an explosion in a mall in the city of Kremenchug in the Poltava Oblast, where supposedly hundreds of people were there. In actuality, the fire in the mall, which was empty and was not functioning, took place as a result of the detonation of ammunition which was held in a neighboring building and was provided by the U.S. and Europe. The same thing happened on the night of the 6th of July of 2023 when the Russian Air Force delivered a strike against a temporary deployment of Ukrainian soldiers and foreign mercenaries in Lvov. And noteworthy that the mayor of Lvov, Mr. Sadovy, acknowledged that the buildings, residential buildings, were damaged by fragments of the air defense. In all these situations, these were maximally exploited by the head of the Kyiv clique in order to beg for more weapons for Ukraine. It's an interesting tendency, isn't it? And it's quite noteworthy that Ukrainian media resources have also noticed this. And by the way, another question begs to be asked. And this is in relation to the words of the representative of Slovenia regarding the confirmed Russian strike against the Okhmatdyt Children's Hospital. In videos posted by Ukrainian users, it's clear to see how one after another, without any interference, 5 rockets of the Russian Air Force strike the factory. Also, it's clearly seen that without any interference, a single rocket hits the children's hospital, a rocket of the air defense of Ukraine. It's impossible to mistake it due to the easily recognizable rocket fin assembly and other traits. How is it possible that Ukrainian air defense misses all 5 strikes against the factory, but hits the children's hospital directly? Maybe the representative of the Kyiv regime can answer that question. We await also reaction from Norwegian authorities, who it would seem supplied to the assembly NASAMS to the Zelensky regime. Did they authorize it to be used for a strike against the children's hospital? And also that it, in contravention of international humanitarian law norms, that it would be located in residential neighborhoods. Against that background, in line with instructions on how to conduct propaganda, the head of the presidential office, Yermak, had time to make a statement about the impossibility of negotiations with Russia. There's no doubt that the leadership of Ukraine will use today's situation as a pretext for the further ignoring the demands and aspirations of Ukrainian society and of all international society for an attempt to find a peaceful solution to the crisis. And it's understandable, because in such a scenario there will be no need for an emergency military situation, and this will require holding elections. And the Kiev clique, which has lost all legitimacy, fears this more than anything, acknowledging that the population has a very negative attitude toward it. This is why it prefers to sacrifice tens, if not hundreds of thousands of its own citizens who are sent into a senseless meat grinder. We, on our side, have frequently spoke in favor of beginning negotiations and ending hostilities. However, this must be a cessation rather than a pause in hostilities, in order to give which would give the possibility for Kiev to lick its wounds and rearm. Furthermore, the root causes of the Ukrainian crisis must be tackled. Without this, there will not be any sustainable and lasting peace. Our conditions for concluding the conflict were clearly stated by President Putin on the 14th of June at the meeting with the leadership of our foreign ministry. We value also initiatives of all states who are aimed at a genuine ceasefire and taking into account our legitimate concerns, rather than aimed at promoting propaganda operations such as a pseudo-peace conference in Switzerland. And as long as Kyiv and its sponsors remain deaf to the appeals of using diplomacy, we will continue to be forced to compel Ukraine to peace and eliminate the root causes of the current crisis situation through military means.